Hi, and welcome to the channel. You know, this time of year, like a lot of other people, I enjoy taking pictures of the fall colors. But just like in the thumbnail for this video, sometimes taking pictures of those fall colors can lead to highlights, bright areas at the top of the frame where the light is sort of filtering in through the trees. And because it's bright, the viewer's eye tends to go there, and it's pulled away from the main subject and tends to move the eye out of the frame. So it'd be nice to be able to fix them. And I actually was working on that photo, and I thought, well, it would make an interesting video to show you how to very cleanly, very easily be able to fix those highlights without anyone being able to tell that you did it. So let's have a look at the video. So this is the photograph from the thumbnail. And as you can see, in this region here, and even out here, there are some bright areas of light filtering through the trees. And it may not be the world's biggest deal, but you know, it's bright and it draws the eye away from the main subject towards the edge of the frame. And so I'd like to fix it. So how do we fix this and get rid of these bright highlights? Well, one could crop the photo, but then you'd have to crop to here and you're cutting it close to the trees. So I don't really want to do that. Let's zoom in here a bit and look at the area. And one could say, well, why not just clone? So let's show what the problem is with that. Is I made a layer here to clone on, and I'm going to pick my clone stamp, and the clone stamp is here. We've got some settings on it, and I'm going to pick an area to clone. Let's clone some of this into here, and you'll see the problem. Well, if I do that, it doesn't necessarily look bad, but it doesn't look natural either. I mean, you've got this tree trunk here cut off, you have trees and branches going everywhere, you have circular patterns here, and it doesn't look the greatest. So you can see what I mean. If I turn this off and turn it on, it might fool you from a distance, but it doesn't look completely natural. So I'm going to show a different way of fixing this using a technique called cloning into a selection. But before I do that, and I think that'll give a much better result than this, but before I do that, I'd like to demonstrate exactly what this technique is and how it works, so you'll know exactly what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So let's go, for me to demonstrate this, to this image. And you can see here the bottom portion of the image is black, and we have two blue squares. And if you think of the blue squares as maybe blue sky, you'll see where I'm going with this. But what I want to do is turn the squares black by using the clone stamp. So I'm going to do this freehand. I'm going to click Alt, choose my black color, and then try to do this freehand. And you can see where I'm going with this, in that it's very hard to stay within the lines here and make this actually a perfect square. However, instead of trying to do this freehand, if I were instead to choose the rectangular marquee tool and make a selection of the blue square, like such, and then use the stamp tool, use the clone tool, make a selection of black, I can go wherever I want. I don't have to be careful at all. I can just be messy, go all over. And my cloning is always going to stay within the bounds of the selection. Now I can deselect. I'm going to hit Control D and deselect it, and you can see we've got a perfect square. And that's because I was cloning into a selection. No matter where I put my clone stamp, the cloning portion only occurs within the selected area. So now let's go back and see what we can do in terms of fixing our highlights in this image. We want to fix our highlights using the clone into a selection method. So we're going to need to figure out a way to make a selection of these highlights. Well, the first thing I could think of is luminosity masking, but there may be a number of people viewing this that are not familiar with that, so I'm going to keep it even simpler than that. We're going to go, now the sky is sort of a pale blue, so, and then this is blown up to 100% pixel for pixel now. I'm going to go to Select, Color Range, and I've already sort of made that selection, but I clicked on the pale blue. And now you can see you can adjust the amount of the selection with fuzziness, but this doesn't have to be perfect. It has to just look very natural. So I'm going to turn the fuzziness up. You can see we've really got a nice selection of the highlights. Maybe the selection is even a little too much because you can see we have other areas of the image that are selected as well. But you know what? That really doesn't matter because we're not going to be cloning into these areas. We're only going to be cloning into the areas we want to, where our highlights are. So I'm going to click OK. And you can see the marching ants for the selection. And I am now, just from experience, going to go, because this doesn't have to be perfect, but we want it to look good and not have any edges. I'm just going to go into select and mask. I'm going to shift the edge inward just a little bit. And let's feather it just a little bit, maybe 2 pixels or so. Click OK. And now we have our selection, and we can start cloning into it. Now, it's always a good idea to do your cloning on a separate layer. So rather than clone onto the background layer, I'm going to go and create a new layer to clone on. Make sure that's selected. That way, if I make a mistake or I want to try it again, I can just get rid of this layer and still have the original background layer. So what we're going to do is choose an area that looks like it would fit, clone it into the selection. We have to be a little bit careful because we can still pick areas. For example, if I were to pick this branch and clone it into there, it would clone into the selection, but it might not look so natural. So we want to pick areas that look sort of natural that we're cloning into. So we have our marching ants for the selection. I am actually just going to make those marching ants go away for a moment so that we can see how our cloning goes as we do it. And I'm going to do that by hitting Control H for hide. Now that selection is still selected and active. It's just that we can't see the marching ants. So let's see what we might do. Okay, well, let's start here. I'm going to make sure we have the clone stamp selected. I'm going to be using a hard-edged brush because we have edges on our selection. And let's see. Let's try to fill this in. It looks like we could be filling it in maybe with some yellow here. So I'm going to Alt-click on here. And we'll just fill that area in. And you can see how natural that looks when we do that because we're just filling in the selection. Likewise here, well, this green, maybe we can extend that up there a bit, change my brush size a touch, Alt-click here, and you can see how we're filling that area in, and it looks extraordinarily natural because we haven't gone over the edges of selection into the tree. The tree trunk is still intact. Everything looks good. There are some areas, I'm going to slide this all the way here at the edge, where there's a lot of tree trunks and so on, and if we don't want to be quite, and a lot of branches, if we don't want to be quite so careful, we can enlarge our brush a bit. That's a little bit too much. Maybe like that. Alt-click here, and click in there and fill it up. We can, take some green from here and fill it into those spaces. And you see how it fills in those selections without covering up the branch. So really a lot better than just our cloning onto a new layer without a selection made. So I'm going to go Control H. You can see the marching ants. Control D to deselect it. And rather than take you through the entire thing that I've done, I am going to show you the finished product. Here's that low magnification. This is just after I worked on it for a little while. We'll go up to 100% and bring you up into this corner where we worked. And you can see things look really very natural. It would be very difficult for anyone, go out to this corner, for anyone to really say, oh, that's been cloned. No, it's really a very natural look because of the selection. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this technique in action. Well, I hope you found that tutorial on cloning into a selection useful and perhaps something you might be able to use in your own work. And if you enjoy videos such as this, I'd really appreciate your support of the channel by having you click on that subscribe button below the video. I'm Howard, and my channel is about introducing viewers to photographers who inspire, to discussing all sorts of photographic topics, and to enhancing creativity with Photoshop and Lightroom tutorials. We'll see you next time.